The lone rider silhouetted against a desert sunset. We all know the image. It might be Clint Eastwood in a dusty poncho or the great John Wayne as Rooster Cogburn. For over a century, these tough, quiet, straight-shooting heroes have defined the American West on screen. They are icons of freedom and rugged individualism, men who live by a simple code in a world where good and evil are as clear as day. But what if I told you that this version of the West is mostly a myth, a carefully crafted legend born from dime novels and Hollywood movie magic? The real American West was a far more complicated, gritty, and fascinating place than the movies ever let on. The real cowboys, lawmen, and outlaws were not simple caricatures. They were complex men living in a morally gray world. Today, we're peeling back the legend to uncover the true stories of the real-life figures who inspired your favorite westerns. Part 1. The Real American Cowboy. The cowboy on screen is a free-roaming adventurer. The historical reality was a life of backbreaking labor. The great era of the cattle drives, lasting only a few decades after the Civil War, was built on the backs of a tough and often forgotten workforce. Forget adventure. The cowboy's life was a grueling, monotonous routine. A typical workday could last 18 to 20 hours, especially on a trail drive. And for all that hard work, a cowboy earned between $25 and $40 a month, paid out only at the end of a drive that could last for months. A day on the trail started before sunrise. After a quick breakfast of coffee, bacon, and biscuits, the real work began. The main job was moving thousands of head of cattle across vast, open country. It was slow, painstaking work. On ranches, it also involved the endless, tedious task of mending barbed wire fences. The environment itself was a constant enemy. Cowboys faced scorching summer heat, blinding dust storms, and freezing blizzards with very little shelter. Living conditions were rough, with men often sharing small, lice-infested bunkhouses. And that myth of the lone cowboy? It's pure Hollywood. Real ranch operations and cattle drives were impossible without tight-knit crews. These men relied on each other for their very survival. Teamwork was everything, whether it was controlling a stampede or standing guard against rustlers. The campfire wasn't just for cooking beans. It was the social center of their world, a place to share stories and forge friendships in the great, lonely expanse of the prairie. The movies also give a very narrow picture of who these men were. The original cowboys were the vaqueros of Mexico, masters of horsemanship and herding cattle for centuries. When Americans moved into the Southwest, they adopted nearly the entire vaquero culture. In fact, many of the words we associate with cowboys come directly from Spanish. Lazo became lasso, chaparreras became chaps, and estampida became stampede. The techniques, the gear, the entire way of life was inherited from these Hispanic pioneers. After the Civil War, millions of freed black men were also looking for opportunity. Many found it on the open range. Historians estimate that as many as 1 in 4 cowboys on the great cattle drives was black. One of the most famous was a man named Nat Love. Born into slavery in Tennessee, Love went west after the war and became an expert ranch hand. He was so skilled that in 1876 he won a rodeo competition in Deadwood, earning him the nickname Deadwood Dick for the rest of his life. Part 2. The Lawman, a tarnished badge. In the movies, the lawman is a pillar of moral purity, a hero in a white hat who single-handedly cleans up a lawless town. The real lawmen of the West were often far more complicated. The line between a lawman and a lawbreaker was often blurry, and a man's reputation could change from one town to the next. Take Wyatt Earp, probably the most legendary lawman of them all. His life was a far cry from the heroic portrayals we see in movies. Before he ever got to Tombstone, Earp was a saloon keeper, a bouncer in brothels, and a gambler. He was even arrested multiple times and was once accused of horse theft. He did serve as an officer in tough cattle towns like Wichita and Dodge City, where he earned a reputation for being tough, but he also ran with notorious gamblers and gunmen, including his famous friend, Doc Holliday. John Henry Doc Holliday was a tragic figure. He was a well-educated dentist from a good family in Georgia. But after he was diagnosed with tuberculosis, he moved west for the dry climate. His worsening health made it hard to practice dentistry, so he turned to his real talent, gambling. He fell into a life of heavy drinking and violence, earning a reputation as a moody and deadly gunfighter. His greatest loyalty was to Wyatt Earp. Their most famous moment, the gunfight at the OK Corral, wasn't the heroic showdown Hollywood makes it out to be. It was the bloody end of a long simmering feud between the Earp brothers and a gang of rustlers known as the Cowboys. The conflict was fueled by politics, money, and pure personal hatred. And it wasn't even Wyatt who was in charge. His brother Virgil, the city marshal, was the one leading the law party to disarm the Cowboys. Wyatt was just a temporary assistant. The fight itself was a chaotic, close-quarters mess that was over in about 30 seconds. It was nothing like the long, drawn-out duels of the movies. While Wyatt Earp was building his legend, one of the most effective lawmen in American history was largely forgotten. His name was Bass Reeves. Born into slavery, Reeves escaped during the Civil War and lived in Indian Territory, where he learned tracking skills and several native languages. In 1875, he became a deputy U.S. Marshal. For 32 years, he patrolled a treacherous 75,000 square mile territory. Reeves was an expert marksman and a master of disguise. Over his incredible career, he arrested more than 3,000 felons. He was involved in numerous gunfights, but was never once wounded. His dedication to the law was absolute. In one famous case, he hunted down and arrested his own son for murder. Many historians now believe that the story of Bass Reeves, a lawman of perfect integrity who always got his man, was the real-life inspiration for the Lone Ranger. Part 3. The Outlaw, from criminal to folk hero. Just as Hollywood cleaned up its lawmen, it romanticized its outlaws, turning desperate criminals into charming rebels. The greatest example of this is the story of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Robert Leroy Parker, or Butch Cassidy, was raised in a devout Mormon family. He took on an alias to avoid bringing shame to his parents. His partner, Harry Longabaugh, got his nickname the Sundance Kid after being arrested for horse theft. Together, they led the Wild Bunch, a gang famous not for random violence, but for the careful planning of their bank and train robberies. Cassidy worked hard to create a public image as a Robin Hood figure who disliked bloodshed. Facing constant pressure from the Pinkerton Detective Agency, Cassidy, Sundance, and their companion at a place fled to South America. They tried to go straight, buying a ranch in Argentina, but their past eventually caught up with them. The official story is that they were killed in a shootout with Bolivian soldiers in 1908. But strong rumors have always persisted that one or both of them faked their deaths and returned to the United States to live out their days in secret. This mystery is a huge part of their appeal. The legends that last are often the ones without a clear ending. The stories of these real-life figures are incredibly compelling, and if you're enjoying this look into the real history of the Old West, we'd appreciate it if you'd take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Part 4. From History to Hollywood. So how did these complicated true stories get turned into the simple myths we know today? Let's look at a couple of classic films. The movie Tombstone from 1993 is a modern favorite. Its power comes from making everything feel real. The filmmakers were obsessed with historical detail. The actors grew real mustaches styled from old photographs. Much of the famous dialogue was lifted directly from old newspaper reports and eyewitness accounts. This attention to detail makes you feel like you're right there in 1880s Arizona, and it makes the story feel more true than it actually is. But for all its authentic feel, Tombstone plays fast and loose with the facts. It compresses the timeline, has events happening in buildings that hadn't been built yet, and combines different real-life events to make the story more dramatic. The film's most famous scene, the final duel between a dying Doc Holliday and the outlaw Johnny Ringo, is a complete work of fiction. Historical evidence suggests the real Johnny Ringo, a troubled man, met a lonely and tragic end by his own hand, hundreds of miles away from Doc Holliday. And the gunfight at the OK Corral is stretched from its real 30-second duration to a minute-and-a-half battle for the big screen. On the other hand, You have a film like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid from 1969. It takes the opposite approach. The movie opens with a title card that cheekily says, "Most of what follows is true." The filmmakers weren't trying for historical accuracy. They wanted to capture the charming, rebellious spirit of their heroes. They used modern-sounding dialogue and a pop music score. The film is really a buddy comedy set in the Old West. Many of its most memorable moments are pure invention. The relentless super posse that hunts Butch and Sundance through the first half of the film was greatly exaggerated. In reality, the Wild Bunch easily avoided the lawmen sent after them. These two films show that there's more than one way to make a great Western. One uses surface realism to sell a fictionalized story, while the other abandons realism altogether to create a timeless myth. What this tells us is that audiences often come to the Western not for a history lesson, but for the power of the myth itself. The romantic, action-packed versions of the West are the ones that have always captured our imagination. Which of these real-life Western figures do you find most fascinating? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories from the Old West.